Well, buy now, pay later concept has been there for a very long time. For example, QVC and HSN has been offering the buy now, pay later for a very long time, but they didn't offer it as buy now, pay later. It's the word that was invented by the payments industry, and that's actually taking a lot of traction. So with QVC and HSN, it was offered to clients. Actually, they are regular patrons of QVC and HSN. So they know who the customers are, they know what kind of products they buy, and they know the history. So when you're offering it to your customer base who are loyal followers, the risk is very minimal because you know them. So now with the buy now, pay later, the buzzword at Money 2020, we have seen actually more and more merchants inclined to offer, the buy now, pay later option. Initially, it was thought about, okay, for high dollar items, which is $500 or more, people cannot afford to pay right away. So why don't I just actually, offer this option so that it's easy on them? And now merchants are also realizing, if I offer the buy now, pay later option, then the service provider who's offering the installment option is taking the liability. So they are the ones, merchant of records, they are billing the merchant, they're billing the cardholder every single month, but the money goes to the merchant. So the problem with the current situation that I anticipate is you are offering the solution to customers that you don't know. They are not the loyal followers. It can be Tim, it can be Annie, anybody in the planet who can actually opt for it. And I see actually a great growth opportunity to increase the revenue, especially for merchants who are selling high ticket items. Now you are able to sell a lot more products, push your inventory out, which is a fantastic option. And there are a lot of players who are offering the solution. MasterCard was so intrigued about this, so they are also coming up with their own buy now, pay later option. Some of the payment processors are also coming up with their own options for their merchants to work with, because there is good amount of revenue to be generated by this option. Since we are actually on the risk side, I always actually wear my risk hat to see what kind of risk can persist in this area, and how can actually the merchants and the providers can actually do it. One of the areas that when I was digging in deeper, there is no credit check being run on the cardholder when they are enrolling for the buy now, pay later. So what it does is actually, I might be a customer where I will buy a $1,000 item, and actually I buy, for example, largest electronic store. Then I go to another electronic store, I buy the largest item, I have my item, they're charging me $100, and I completely cancel my card and I cancel my credit cards. Now they cannot even go to collections in some of the states. They cannot even actually pursue legal because you don't know who these guys are behind the credit card. And most important, because you're not running a credit check, they can keep continuing this fraud abuse from other merchants who are offering buy now, pay later from other providers. So the fraud can accelerate at a bigger level because in one way, we don't actually communicate in a closed network. Everybody operates independently. For example, Best Buy doesn't share the data with Costco. Costco doesn't share the data with somebody else. So somebody who knows this ecosystem can very well play on the buy now, pay later and create a huge amount of fraud. So currently, the way the buy now, pay later works is the merchant shares the revenue a little bit, a small percentage to the buy now, pay later company. So over the period of time, once they see that the risk is slowly increasing, regular customers are trying to defraud because there is no credit check or anything going on, and the fraud level goes high, the buy now, pay later companies are going to slowly shift the liability to the merchant and say, now we want you to be the part of this liability as well. Because we cannot be taking all the risk, you got to be a part of it. And that's where actually the disputes come in. And also I see consumers actually are going to get the product. They are being billed every month. They're going to say, I shouldn't have been billed for the last 2 months. This is fraud. They're defrauding me. So at that case, merchants need to have a valid evidence that needs to be communicated to the buy now, pay later companies, because buy now, pay later companies are the merchant of records. And that's where actually we wanted to provide the solution for buy now, pay later companies, where we can connect the merchant and the buy now, pay later service provider, and we can represent the chargebacks, the illegitimate ones, and help the buy now, pay later companies recover from their losses. And I see that that's where the losses are going to accelerate if they don't do anything about it, because now it's the honeymoon period. Everybody is happy and excited, and I think after the honeymoon period is where they got to be very careful about the fraud that's going to about to unveil. So what we are actually planning on doing is, when a transaction comes in, there are tools available that checks for fraud if it is a stolen credit card, right? And oftentimes it's not 100% foolproof. They still skip through. And also the unfortunate part is you have regular card holders with the valid ID, digital footprint like billing address, shipping address, machine ID, who will bypass the fraud filter, who are committing fraud. And what we actually think is we are building a database right now, especially for transactions in the buy now, pay later industry. So that now, for example, if Best Buy is actually using our database, they will know if this particular cardholder has committed fraud or dispute in the buy now, pay later section of another merchant in a similar industry. That kind of data mapping is going to be so valuable because we look at the dispute data across multiple merchants. We know what these guys purchased. We know where they came from. And we have a tagging mechanism right now where we tag all the buy now, pay later disputes that are happening. And we will be in a position actually to tell the other merchant saying, hey, we have seen fraud happening. Maybe you might want to take that into consideration, and then they can actually take the call. Now, there is also another element. Just because somebody is committing fraud or a dispute on merchant X doesn't mean they're also going to give it to merchant Y. So there is a fair amount of data that goes into play so that it can give that realistic perspective to the merchant so that they are not canceling every single person. The evolution is the only thing that excites the payment industry, right? Nothing is like, oh, I've done my maximum, there is no other scope for improvement. We are always improving. Decades we have improved our payments, seamless. What we are trying to do in the payments industry is how can we create a seamless, pleasant experience to the cardholder, at the same time trying to have a fine balance on the fraud and the disputes that are about to happen after the transaction. So that's always the dance we try to play to find the sweet spot, and then every time we introduce something new like buy now, pay later, there is always, I call it as the fraud gap, right? We tend to not know how the consumer might react. So right now we know how the cardholders are reacting when you are a loyal follower of a particular brand like HSN, QVC. What we don't know is how will the consumer react when you offer it to the mass public who are not a loyal follower of any brand, but it's offered to any solution. So that's the behavior we are trying to learn. And it's going to take about a year or so to understand the patterns, how the patterns are evolving. Is there a particular economy, that's more prone to disputes, or is there particular geographics that's more prone to disputes? Those kind of analytics are going to come into play in our company, and we specialize in dispute intelligence. We analyze all kinds of data around disputes, trying to understand what is triggering the dispute to happen. We call it as the root cause analyzer. So that's what we use to analyze the patterns of disputes. And as you know, we cannot come into a conclusion with a small chunk of data. It takes like years of data to understand the patterns. But what we are also doing right now is the technology is so evolved, you don't have to wait years and years to adapt to the situation. As and when you see the patterns, you can make smaller adjustments that makes the fraud gap lesser and lesser, and you make it more secure. So I think that's where the industry is moving towards, and learning from the behavioral pattern of, I call it as actually non-member groups. That's what we are actually very curious to know, how this will all fall through, how we can represent the merchants, what kind of disputes are going to be coming in. Oftentimes I've seen when issuers are looking at the disputes, their team who is looking at the dispute are less aware of the new trends in payments and technology. So when you explain to them, oh, the product was from Best Buy, but for example, the payment was actually processed by Klarna, and Klarna is receiving the dispute, an issuer can look at it and say, wait a minute, I don't see Klarna invoice here, I see Best Buy invoice, so there is a confusion, and they might favor the cardholder, not necessarily knowing the connection between Best Buy and Klarna. So this is a new industry, and on the issuer side, especially the issuer dispute department, there has to be a fair amount of education that has to go through for them to understand this new trend in service. So that's where we are going to be coming in. When we are putting together the dispute packages, we are going to do a fairly good job in letting the issuer know what this transaction is about, why there are two independent companies, and the evidence that we are putting it together. And we are going to be optimizing that to understand how different issuers are reacting, and that's where our success is going to be coming through in working closely with the merchant and the buy now pay later companies. So the kind of data, for example, when you are actually into buy now pay later, you go to Best Buy, you actually, Best Buy is partnering with, assume that company X who's offering the buy now pay later. Now the merchant of record is going to be buy now pay later company, not Best Buy. But you can imagine when you're looking at your credit card statement, you see X and you say, wait a minute. And also it's going to say $100. It's not going to say actually it's a $500 or $1,000 TV. Even though you know that you opted for actually, the installment payment, recurring payment, you are not going to remember who they partnered with. And there is going to be a fair amount of buyer confusion that's going to come into play, where they're going to call their bank and say, I never did that. I don't even know what this $100 is for. And they might not be in a position to transfer the data immediately. So what we have actually done is we are partnered with the card networks right now, like Visa, MasterCard, and Amex, where we are able to transfer the copy of the invoice real time to the issuer. So if you are a customer calling the bank and say, I don't understand what this transaction is, now the bank can say, hey, you purchased the product with Best Buy and you went for a 5-month payment option, and this is a part of the payment, so that can give them the clarity to eliminate the confusion. And what we are also going to do is, when we are analyzing the disputes, we are going to tell the merchant how many of your disputes are coming from the buy now pay later, what percentage of your transactions are risky through that. And we are also going to say how many of those disputes that are happening are due to buyer confusion. Now, Best Buy or any other company can do a better job in emailing the clients and say, okay, you know what? This is the option you opted for, and this is what your statement is going to say. They can look at adjusting their email so that it's more prominent for the cardholder to know this is what they're going to see in the credit card statement. And also you can change a lot of your business policies as to who you want to offer or what product you want to offer. We also track the disputes that are happening in the buy now pay later option for a particular product too, by product segment. You have electronics, you have actually treadmills, you have actually t-shirts. So if you offer multiple category of products and I see a high number of disputes happening on the clothing side, then you might want to change your business decision as to not to offer them. Or if I see that there is more and more customer filing a dispute from a particular city, then you can actually trigger it and say, you know what, maybe this city we don't want to offer it because this is not yielding better profit. So you can learn a lot. Our tagline is every chargeback tells a story. You can learn a lot through the data, and we provide more than 40 different analytical reports for them to know the patterns, for them to make business decisions that can help them secure their profit and have a pleasant customer experience. We also provide white glove service where we handhold them, where we actually tell them where to look at, because oftentimes we have seen when you provide so much data, it can be overwhelming because this is not their bread and butter. They want to run their business, they want to hire experts like us to do the job. So we also have actually business intelligence experts who do the work for the merchants, tell them where to look at, what they need to do. And here is where the results are going to reflect, and this is our projected results, so that they don't have to do the heavy lifting. We will do it for them. And I think it's going to be a collaborative effort that we all are going to be doing in order to actually make this buy now pay later subscription model very successful.